Part 1. On purification from impurities, the examination of which involves a study of that which is removed, the vehicle of removal, and the manner of removal. That which is removed. That which is removed is impurity. Substances are of three kinds: inanimate objects, animate objects, and parts of animate objects. As to inanimate objects, all except wine and intoxication beverages are pure. As to animate objects, all except the dog and the pig and their products are pure. When animate objects die, they are all impure except five, namely human beings, fish, locusts, appleworms, and of the same category as appleworms is every food which changes, as well as every form of life which has no flowing blood, like flies, beetles, and the like. Water is not rendered impure when such objects fall into it. As for the parts of inanimate objects, they are of two kinds. The first comprises those things which may be cut off, and its rule is the same as that of dead bodies. One exception is the hair, which is not rendered impure by shearing and death. Bones, however, are rendered impure by death. The second comprises all wet things which the body exudes or emits. Everything which is not subject to change and has no fixed seat, like tears and sweat, are pure, but saliva and the mucus of the nose, and whatever things which have a fixed seat and are subject to change, are all impure except the seed of life, like semen and eggs. Pus, blood, feces, and urine are all impure in all animals. Nothing is exempted of these impurities except five things. The first, the remains of ordure after abstersion with stones. Whatever does not extend beyond the orifice is exempted. Second, the mud in the streets and the dust of the dried up dung, despite the fact that their impurity is established, are exempt only to the extent to which they cannot be avoided, i.e. which is not the result of negligence or oversight. Third, what hangs at the bottom of the shoes of impurities, of which the streets is always full. This is exempt after it has been wiped off because of necessity. Fourth, the blood of fleas, little or much, except when it goes beyond the ordinary limits, whether it be on your own shirt or someone else's shirt, which you may wear. Fifth, the blood of pimples and pus they discharge. Ibn Umar once wiped off a pimple on his face, and it bled, but he went ahead and performed his prayer without first washing. Of the same category is what chronic boils discharge, as well as the blood which issue after phlebotomy, except in the cases where the issues of blood is caused by an abscess, where it will be subject to the same rule which governs the blood of menstruation, and not that of pimples, which man is never always free. The toleration of these five impurities by law shows that the principle of purity is lenient, and all that was innovated therein is the result of obsessions which have no foundation. The vehicle of removal is either solid or liquid. And the solid is the stone of abstersion which has been purified through being sun-dried. It should be hard, pure, and dry stone, but not a relic of any veneration. As to liquids, none of them remove impurities except water, and not any kind of water at that, but only the pure water which has not become contaminated through its contact with other bodies. Again, water ceases to be pure when through contact with impurities it changes in taste or colour or odour. If, on the other hand, it does not change in any of these, and its quantity approaches 250 manes, which is equivalent to 5 Iraqi rotels, it will not become impure, because the Prophet said, when water is sufficient to fill 2 pitchers, it carries no impurities. According to a Shafi, if it were less, it would become impure. This relates to stagnant water only. Running water, on the other hand, when polluted with impurities, the ripples which have been contaminated with these impurities become impure, except those beneath and below, because the ripples of water are separated one from the other. Similarly, the impurities, if they should flow into the watercourse, render impure the part in which they fall, as well as the part to the right and the left of the part wherein they fall, if the amount of water does not exceed 2 pitchers. If the flow of water were faster than the flow of the impurities, what lies over the impurities is pure, and what lies below them is impure, no matter how far it may move or how much it may be, unless it gathers in a pond or cavity the size of which is larger than 2 pitchers. If an amount of impure water equal to 2 pitchers should gather in one place, that water will become pure if mixed with a larger quantity of pure water. This is the position of a Shafi. I had hoped, however, that his position would be like that of Malik, who held that water, no matter how meagre its amount might become, would not be rendered impure except through change in taste, colour or odour, because the need for it is great, and to lay down the condition of 2 pitchers would simply provoke suspicion and fear. It has therefore become very difficult to observe this rule, and upon my life it is difficult. Those who would try and examine it would find out that for themselves. Furthermore, I have no doubt that if such a condition had been stipulated, then Mecca and Medina, because of the scarcity of running water and still water in big quantities in either town, would have been the 2 most difficult places to achieve purity. Yet from the time of the Apostle of God to the last days of his companions, not a single crisis pertaining to purification, nor a single question concerning the manner of safeguarding water from impurities had been reported. The vessels in which their water was placed was handled by boys and slave girls who were not careful against impurities. Furthermore, Omar performed his ablution with water from the jar of a Christian woman. This act of Omar is just as clear as binding and as genuine tradition, which fulfills the requirements of establishing the water becomes impure only when it changes in taste, colour or odour. Otherwise, the impurity of the Christian woman and that of her vessels are quite evident and are very readily discerned. Therefore, this position becomes unobtainable. The fact that no question concerning it arose during the days of the Prophet and his companions is one proof for its being untenable. The action of Omar is another, and a third proof is found in the fact that the Apostle of God was wont to incline the water vessel to the cap and leave all the vessels unprotected against it, even after he had seen it eat a mouse. Nowhere in their land were tanks set apart for cats to drink, nor did the cats go down to the bottom of the well for water. The 4th proof is that Shafi has definitely said that water which a certain impurity has been washed was pure, as long as it did not undergo any change in taste, colour or odour, and was impure whenever it did undergo any such change. And what difference is there between the water contaminated with impurities through its own contact with them or through the contact of impurities with it? And what sense is there in saying that the force of the contact of water prevents impurity, although contact itself does not hinder the intermixture of impurity? If the one is to be explained on the grounds of need and necessity are also present in the other. There is no difference between pouring water into a vessel wherein there is an impure garment and throwing the impure garment in a vessel where there is pure water, both being ordinary practices in laundry washing. A 5th proof is found in the fact that it was a practice to perform the abstersion along the edges of small bodies of running water. There is no disagreement concerning the position of Shafi that if urine should fall into running water, and the water does not undergo any change in taste or colour or odour, it will still remain permissible to use the water for ablution no matter how small the quantity. And what difference is there between running and still water? Upon my life, which is the stronger argument? To base the decision on the lack of change in the water or on the force of its flow? Furthermore, what are the limitations of this force? Does it extend to the water which flows within the pipes of baths or not? If it does not extend to the water which flows within the pipes of baths, what accounts for the difference? And if it does extend to such water, that is the difference between what falls into it and what falls into its course as it is poured out from vessels over the body when both are running waters. Furthermore, if it is to be ruled that water which flows over a solid and stationary impurity is impure, although it does not undergo any change, and that it remains impure until a quantity equal to 2 pitchers collects in a small pond, it should be remembered that urine is intermixed with running water more readily than any solid or stationary object possibly could. And what difference is there between the solid and liquid impurities when the water is the same and admixture is more through-going than mere contact? The 6th proof is found in the fact that if a rottle of urine was poured into a quantity of water equal to 2 pitchers, and then the water was distributed into different vessels, water drawn from any of these vessels is pure, yet it is well known that urine, though a small quantity of it, contaminates all. Which is more convincing to explain, that the water is pure because it underwent no change, or because of its large quantity even after that quantity has been ceased to be large, and despite the knowledge that a part of the impurity still exists in the remainder of that water? A 7th proof is seen in the fact that in bygone days, ascetics constantly performed their ablutions in public baths and dipped their hands in vessels in tanks, despite the small quantity of water these tanks contained, and despite their knowledge that both pure and impure hands have been dipped into these tanks. These incidents, together with urgent need and necessity, strengthened the belief that only lack of any change in the water was taken into consideration whenever purity was questioned, relying thereby on the words of the Prophet when he said, "Water was created pure, and nothing renders it impure except that which changes its taste or colour or odour." There is a basic truth in this, namely that it is the property of every liquid to transform whatever may fall into it on its own, provided that liquid be the dominant element of the two. Thus, just as the dog, when it falls into a mine of salt, is itself transformed into salt, and through its transformation into salt and its loss of cananity becomes pure, so is the case with the vinegar and milk. Whenever they are placed in water which is dominant, they lose their properties and acquire those of water, unless the vinegar and the milk be the dominant elements, in which case they will prevail. Their prevalence is known through the presence of their taste or colour or odour. This, then, is the criterion whereby things which are determined are judged. To it the law has pointed in the case of the water, which is capable of removing impurities. It is therefore worthy of being relied upon. Consequently, through it the guilt is lifted off of those who use water, which is the fastidious deem impure. And the meaning of the tradition that water was created pure is explained through it, since water prevails over impurities and renders the objects pure, just as it was shown in the case of the two pitchers, as well as in the case of the used water and the running water, and in the case of inclining the vessel for the cat. Do not, however, think that is an exemption, for were it so, it would have been like the remains of ordure after abstersion and the blood of fleas. It would be deemed pure until through excess it makes the water impure. Even when the quantity is small, water is not rendered impure by articles steeped over or washed therein by a cat licking therefrom. As to the saying of the Prophet that the water carries no impurities, it itself is ambiguous, for whenever water undergoes change it carries impurities. If it be said that the Prophet meant with his words that water carries no impurities so long as it undergoes no change, it will then be possible to say that in most cases water does not undergo any change through its contact with ordinary impurities. Furthermore, the words of the tradition imply the acceptance that when the quantity of water is short of 2 pitchers, the water carries impurities when brought into contact with them. Nevertheless, it is quite possible to ignore the implied meaning of the tradition for lesser reasons than those we have already mentioned in these 7 proofs. The apparent meaning of the words of the Prophet that water carries no impurities is to negate the act of carrying. In other words, it transforms impurities to its own property. Just as we say that a mine of salt will not hold a dog or anything else, but will decompose and transform them into salt. Men perform their abstersion in small waters and streamlets and dip impure vessels therein, and then wonder whether or not the water has undergone any perceptible change. It has therefore become evident that whenever the quantity of waters exceeds 2 pitchers, ordinary impurities do not cause it to undergo any change. If you should say that the Prophet had said that water carries no impurities, no matter how much these impurities increase, then the argument would be turned against you, because whenever the impurities increase in quantity, water would carry them in effect as well as in fact. For this reason, I would say that it is imperative for both schools to be specific and limit their interpretation to the ordinary impurities. In short, in the case of ordinary impurities, I am inclined to be tolerant and lenient, following therein the example of the early Muslims and hoping to do away with the fears and suspicions. In that spirit, I have given my legal opinions concerning disputed problems of purity. Now, on the manner of removal. If an impurity is an impurity in effect, i.e. it has no palpable body, it is sufficient to run water over all its parts. But if it's an impurity in fact, i.e. physical, it is necessary to remove the physical. The persistence of the taste indicates the persistence of the physical. The same is true of the persistence of colour, except in such cases where the impurity leaves an undeniable stain, in which event it is exempted, provided it's been thoroughly rubbed and washed. But the persistence of odour indicates the persistence of the physical, and is not exempted except in such cases where the object has a strong odour which is difficult to remove, in which case soaking it in water and wringing it several successive times will do instead of rubbing it and washing it, as in the case of the persistence of colour. It will do away with fear and suspicion to know that things have been created pure. Objects on which impurities are not positively seen may be used in prayer, and each one should not resort to deduction to prove the presence of impurities. Part 2. Purification from excrements. The purification from excrements comprises ablutions, major ablution, and purification with sand, wudu, ghusl, and tayammum, and are preceded by abstersion, istinja. We shall now state the manner of their performance in the prescribed order, together with their etiquette and rules, beginning with the reason for ablution and the etiquette of answering the call of nature. The etiquette of answering the call of nature. The person should go into the wilderness far from the eyes of the onlookers. He should shelter himself behind something whenever possible, and should not uncover their nakedness before he reaches the place of squatting. He should not face the sun or the moon with his nakedness, neither should he face the Qibla or turn his back unto it when his nakedness is uncovered, except when he is within a house, and even then it is better to avoid that position. It is permissible for him, when in the wilderness, to shelter himself behind his camel or use for that purpose his skirt. He should avoid squatting down for the purpose of answering the call of nature in any place where it is customary for men to meet for conversation. He should not urinate in still water or under a fruit tree or in any enclosure. When urinating, he should keep away from hard surface and windy places in order to avoid splatter and splash. When he squats down to answer the call of nature, he should support himself on the left leg. When entering a house to urinate, he should advance with the left leg first, and when he leaves, he should advance with the right. Furthermore, he should not urinate while standing. Aisha said, He who tells that the Prophet was wont to urinate standing, believe him not. Umar also said, The Apostle of God once saw me urinate while standing, and he told me, O Umar, do not urinate while standing. Henceforth, I never urinated while standing. Yet in instances it is allowed, since Hudayfa related that the Apostle once urinated standing, and that Hudayfa then brought him water for ablution, which he performed, and wiped his shoes off. Again, no one should urinate in the bathtub. In this connection, the Prophet said that most of men's fears and suspicions, whether or not things are pure, result from urinating in bathtubs. Ibn al-Mubarak said, however, if the water in the bathtub be running water, then there is no harm in urinating therein. When a person proceeds to answer the call of nature, he should not take with him anything which contains the name of God or of his apostle. He should not enter the water closet bareheaded, and on entering he should say, I seek refuge in God against the accursed Satan, the filthy, the impure, the abominable, the pernicious. On leaving the water closet, he should say, Praise be to God, who has removed from me that which is harmful, and has left me that which is useful. He should say after he has left the water closet. He should prepare the stones for abstersion before squatting, and should not perform the act of abstersion over the place where he had defecated. He should take the utmost pains in cleaning his penis from urine by shaking it, and from 3 times, and by stroking its lower extremity with his hand. Nevertheless, he should not worry too much over the state of his cleanliness, lest he become victim to an obsession which will wear him out. If he should feel something wet there, let him suppose that it is nothing but some of the water with which he performed the act of abstersion. If this does not allay his suspicion, let him sprinkle some water on the place so that he can assure himself that the wetness is caused by water, not by the urine. Consequently, he will not allow shaitan to prevail over him through fear and suspicion. The Prophet himself, we are told in tradition, has done the same thing, namely sprinkled water over his orifice. The person who was wont to exert the least effort in effecting the cleanliness of his orifice was the most learned among them, for fear and obsessions indicate lack of learning and ignorance. In a tradition, Salman al-Farisi said, The Apostle of God taught us everything, even how to answer the call of nature. He commanded us not to perform the act of abstersion with either bone or dried dung, and forbade us to face the Qibla when defecating or urinating. A certain Bedouin, having fought with one of the companions, told him, You do not even know how to defecate. And the companion answered and said, Yeah, by your father's beards I do, and I am past master at it. I go out far into the wilderness, prepare the stones for abstersion, face the wormwood, turn my back to the wind, squat like the deer, and stoop, raising my posterior as the ostrich raises his tail. It is sometimes allowed for the man to urinate close to his companion, provided he be concealed and sheltered. The Apostle of God has done that despite his extreme shyness, in order to show men that it was permissible. Now the manner of abstersion, i.e. stinger. The person will then perform the abstersion for his posterior orifice with 3 stones. If the orifice is cleansed therewith, the 3 stones will suffice. Otherwise a 4th stone must be used. If this proves insufficient, a 5th must be used, because although only cleanliness is necessary, the use of odd number of stones is desirable. The Prophet said, when thou employest stones for thy abstersion, use an odd number. In performing the abstersion, the person should hold a stone with his left hand, place it at the forepart of his orifice just before the seat of impurity, and run it over with horizontal and circular motion to the rear part. He should then take the 2nd stone, place it at the rear part, and run it to the forepart. Then, taking the 3rd stone, he should run it around the orifice. If he should not be able to run the stone around the orifice, he might perform the act in parts. He should then take a large stone with his right and his penis with the left, and with it the left move the penis, thereby wiping it against the stone in 3 different places, or against 3 stones, or against 3 different places on the wall, until he sees wetness on the place where he had wiped his penis. If that is accomplished after he wiped it twice, he should do it a 3rd time. This is obligatory if he wishes to limit himself to the use of stones. If that is accomplished after he had wiped his penis 4 times against a stone, it would be desirable to wipe it a 5th time for the sake of maintaining an odd number. He should then move to another place to perform the act of abstersion with water, pouring it over the seat of excrement and rubbing it with the left until nothing which the palm of the hand could feel is left. He should not go to excess by trying to remove the parts which are still within the orifice, because such a thing would give rise to obsession. He should realize that wherever water cannot reach lies within, and these parts which lie within are not subject to the rule that governs impurities unless they come out. And everything which is external and which is subject to the rule that governs impurities, the definition which governs impurities fulfills the definition of purity, and when the water reaches and removes it. There is, therefore, no sense in being victim to an obsession in this respect. At the end of his stinger, the person should say, O my God, purify my heart from hypocrisy, and make my body chaste. He should then wipe his hand against a wall or earth for removing any odour which might have persisted thereon. The use of both stones and water together is desirable, as it was related that when God revealed unto unto the Prophet the verse, Therein are men who aspire to purity, and God loves the purified. The Apostle said to the people of Quba, What is the purity for which God has herewith praised you? They said, We were wont to use both stones and water for performing the act of abstersion. Now the manner of ablution. When the person is through with abstersion, he should proceed to perform his ablution, for never has a prophet of God been seen emerging after he had answered the call of nature without immediately performing the ablution. The person should commence with the use of a toothpick. Thus the Prophet said, Your mouths are the pathways of the Quran, render them therefore clean with toothpicks. His purpose when using the toothpick should be the purification of his mouth for the reading of Quran, and the invocation of God in prayer. The Prophet said, One prayer after the use of the toothpick is better than 75 prayers without the use of the toothpick. And again, had it not been for my fear to overburden people, I would have commanded them to use the toothpick, i.e. the miswak, before every prayer. And again, why do you come before me with yellow teeth? Use toothpicks. He was wont to use the toothpick several times every night. It was related that Ibn Abbas once said, The Apostle has so repeatedly commanded us to use the toothpick that we expected him soon to receive a revelation on its use. The Apostle also said, Use ye the toothpick, it is a purifier for the mouth and well pleasing unto God. Ali said, the toothpick develops and strengthens the memory and banishes sluggishness. Furthermore, it was customary for the companions of the Prophet to go about with the toothpicks carried behind their ears. The manner of its use. For a miswak, i.e. the toothpick, men should use the arak, wood, or other rough branches, which remove the yellow deposits around the teeth. The toothpick should be used both horizontally and vertically, and if one should limit himself to one of the two motions, let him use it horizontally. It is desirable to use the toothpick prior to every prayer and prior to every ablution, whether it is followed with prayer or not. Equally desirable is its use when the taste of the mouth has become bad as a result of sleep or long abstinence from food or eating a thing of unpleasant smell. After completing the cleansing of his mouth with the toothpick, the person should then proceed with his ablution, facing therein the Qibla, and saying, in the name of God, the Merciful, the Compassionate. The Prophet said, there is no ablution to him who does not call upon the name of God, i.e. no complete ablution. The person should then say, O God, I seek refuge in Thee from the power of the devil. I seek refuge in Thee, O God, lest they should come and surround me. He then should wash his hands 3 times before putting them into the vessel and should say, O God, I ask Thee for luck and blessing and seek refuge in Thee against ill luck and destruction. His purpose should be the removal of excrement or making prayer lawful. He should bear that purpose in mind until he has washed his face. If, however, he happens to forget the purpose of his ablution just before he washes his face, he will not be penalized for it. He then should take up a handful of water with his right and rinse his mouth with it thrice and gargle, allowing the water to reach his throat, except when he is fasting, at which time he should take it easy, lest he swallow any of it. Having done that, he should say, O God, help me to recite Thy book and glorify Thy name. Thereupon, he should take another handful and inhale it thrice, forcing it with his breath up his nose and flushing thereby its cartilages, and then force the water out by exhaling. As he sniffs the water, he should say, O God, grant me to enjoy the perfumes of paradise and be gracious unto me. As he exhales, in order to force the water out of his nose, he should say, O God, I seek refuge in Thee against the stench of hell and the evil of the world. This is said because inhaling constitutes drawing in, and exhaling is removal and rejection. He then should take another handful of water for his face and should wash it from the beginning of the flat part of the forehead to the extremity of the forepart of the chin lengthwise, and from ear to ear laterally. The 2 temples which are on either side of the forehead are not included in the face, but form part of the head. The water is allowed to reach the edge of the bangs which women are wont to effect. It is that part which lies at the side of the face, when the end of a thread is placed upon the top of the ear, and the other end is placed upon the corner of the forehead. The water, however, is allowed to reach the 4 parts of the face where the hair grows, namely, the eyebrows, the moustache, the side whiskers, and the eyelashes, which are for the most part sparse. The side whiskers are that part of the beard which grows parallel to and alongside the ears. Water should also be allowed to reach the base of sparse but not thick beards, i.e. the frontal part of the face. The rule which governs the hair between the lower lip and the chin is the same as that which governs the beard, whether thick or sparse. He should wash his face in this prescribed manner 3 times, and then pour water over the long part of his beard, and work his fingers in and clean the eye holes, the inner corners of the eye, where the dirt which they discharge collects, and the outer corners where the coal gathers. For the Prophet, it was related that the Prophet himself did that. When the person washes his eyes, his wish should be that sin would depart therefrom. Similarly, at the washing of every member of his body, he should wish for the departure of the sin therefrom. As he washes his face, he should say, O God, cleanse Thou my face with Thy light when Thou cleanse the face of Thy saints. And blacken not my face with Thy darkness when Thou rendereth the faces of Thy enemies black. When washing his face, he should also let water flow to the interstices of his beard, for it is desirable. He should then wash his arms up to the elbows 3 times, and when washing his hands he should remove the ring around his finger. He then should draw his wetted right hand over the forepart of his head, raising his head gear with the left, and should apply water to the upper part of the upper arm. For the believers will appear on the day of resurrection with whiteness on their foreheads, wrists, and ankles from the effect of ablution. Similarly, a tradition declares that the Prophet said, "Whoever is able to clean the forepart of his head, let him do so." It's also been related that the whiteness appears on those parts of the body which are washed at the time of ablution. The person should begin with the washing of his right hand and say, "O God, on the day of judgment, hand me the book of my actions in my right hand and judge me with lenience." When he washes his left, he should say, "I beseech thee, O God, hand me not the book of my actions in my left hand or from my back." He should then proceed to wipe his head thoroughly by soaking his hands in the water, bringing the tips of their fingers, both the right and the left together, placing them on the forepart of the head, running them over to the opposite side, and finally bringing them back again to the forepart. All this constitutes one wiping. He should go through it thrice and say, "Cover me with thy mercy, O God, and shower upon me of thy blessings. Give me to sit in the shadow of thy throne, on that day when there shall be no shade except thine own." He should then wipe his ears, both outside and inside, with fresh water. To do this, he should put the tips of his forefingers into his ears and twist them around, passing his thumbs at the same time over their back. He should place the palms of his hands over the outer part of his ears, repeating the act thrice and saying, "O God, make me, O God, one of those who hear and pattern their work in accordance to the best of what they hear. O God, let me hear the crier of paradise with the righteous." He should then wipe his neck with fresh water, because the Apostle said, wiping the neck safeguards against being shackled on the day of resurrection. As he wipes his neck, he should say, "O God, release my neck from the yoke of fire, and save thou me from the chains and shackles." He should then wash his right foot thrice. And with his left hand pass his fingers between his toes from bottom up, beginning with the little toe of the right foot and ending with the little toe of the left. As he washes his right foot, he should say, "O God, steady my foot on the narrow bridge on that day when feet slip down into the fires of hell." And as he washes his left foot, he should say, "I seek thy, O God, lest my foot should slip off the bridge on that day when the feet of the hypocrites slip." In washing his feet, he should let the water reach halfway up his legs. When he is through, he should turn his head up to heaven and say, "I testify that there is no God but Allah, that he has no associate, and that Muhammad is his servant and apostle. Glory be to thee, O God, and praise be to thee, for there is no God but thee. I have done evil and sinned against my own soul. I beg thy forgiveness, O God, and I hearken back unto thee. Forgive therefore my sin, and be gracious to me. Thou art the forgiving, the merciful. Give me to be penitent, O God, and make me pure. Grant me to be one of thy righteous servants, and make me patient and grateful. Help me always to remember thy name, and to praise thee day and night." It is said that whoever repeats this collect after performing his ablutions will have the seal of approval fixed to his performance, and will have a place prepared for him beneath the throne, wherefrom he will continue to praise and glorify his holy name. His reward will be preserved for him until the day of resurrection. Several things are undesirable during the ablution. One of these is to wash each member more than 3 times. Whoever goes beyond 3 transgresses. Another undesirable thing is to be extravagant in the use of water. The Prophet performed his ablution, washing each member 3 times, and said, "Whoever goes beyond 3 transgresses and does evil." And again, there will rise among this people some who will be extravagant in their supplications and purity. It is also said, a sure sign of weakness in man's learning is his fondness for water during the act of purification. Ibrahim ibn Adham said, "Obsessions grow out of fastidiousness in purification." Among the desirable things are also speaking during ablution and splashing the face with water. Others also objected to the use of towels after ablution, saying that the water used in the act is weighed on the day of resurrection. This was said by both Sa'id ibn al-Musayyib and Az-Zuhri, but Mu'adh related that the Apostle himself wiped his face after ablution with the end of his garment. Aisha also related that he had a towel which he used after ablution. The authenticity of this tradition, however, has been questioned. It is also undesirable to perform the act of ablution from water contained in brass vessels, or to use for that purpose water which has been heated in the sun. This latter thing is undesirable for medical reasons. The objection to the use of water contained in brass vessels was related on the authority of Ibn Umar and Abu Hurairah. A certain person said, I was brought out for Shu'bah water in brass vessel. I brought out for Shu'bah water in brass vessel, but he refused to perform his ablution therefrom. In this objection to brass vessels, he followed the example of Ibn Umar and Abu Hurairah. When the person completes his ablution and proceeds to pray, he must no doubt be aware of his external purity, the purity which men behold and see. He should, however, be ashamed of communing with God without first purifying his heart, which God beholds and sees. He should know with certainty that the purity of the heart is accomplished through repentance, putting aside blameworthy traits, and laying hold onto those which are praiseworthy. He who limits himself to external purity and cleanliness is like the person who, desiring to invite a king to his house, embarks on the task of plastering and whitewashing its outer gate, but neglects the interior, leaving it stuffed with all manner of dirt and filth. Such a man is befitted for contempt and perdition, and Allah knows best. The excellence of ablution. The Apostle of God said, whoever performs his ablution well and prostrates himself twice in prayer, without allowing anything worldly to distract his mind, will be absolved of all his sins, and will become as innocent as he was when he was born. Or according to another version, without permitting his mind to wander, will be forgiven of all his past sins. The Apostle also said, Let me tell you where with God atones sin and raises the ranks of the faithful, performing the ablution though in distress, frequenting the mosques, and looking forward to the time of next prayer. Verily this is the threefold bond. The Apostle performed the ablution throwing water once on every member and said, Prayer is unacceptable before God after such ablution. He performed the ablution throwing water twice and said, Whoever performs the ablution throwing water twice on every member will twice receive his reward from God. Finally, he performed the ablution throwing water 3 times and said, This is my manner of ablution, and that of the prophets before me, and that of Abraham, the friend of the merciful God. The Apostle also said, He who will remember God when he performs his ablution will have his whole body purified by God. But he who will not remember God at his ablution will not have his body purified except in those places where the water was applied. And again, he who performs the ablution while pure will be credited with 10 good deeds by God. He also said, An ablution upon ablution is like light upon night. All this to urge and induce men to repeat and renew their ablution. The Apostle said, When a Muslim during the act of ablution rinses his mouth, the sins leave it. When he blows his nose, they are gone therefrom. When he washes his hands, the sins, even those beneath his fingernails, are removed. When he washes his head, he rids it of its sins, even those in and behind the ears. When he washes his feet, he cleanses them from sins, even those beneath his toenails. Then, and only then, will his going to the mosque and his prayer therein be meritorious. It's also been related that he who is pure has the same reward as he who is fasting. The Apostle also said, Whoever performs the ablution well, and then lifts his head unto the heaven and says, I testify that there is no God but Allah alone, he has no associate, and I testify that Muhammad is a servant, the Apostle, the 8 gates of paradise will be flung open before him, and he will enter therein through whichever gate he may desire. Umar said, Good ablution drives shaitan away from you. Mujaddid also said, He who is able to go to bed purified, remembering God and penitent, let him do so, for souls are brought back to life in the same condition in which they are taken away. The manner of major ablution, i.e. the ghusl. The Persian should place the vessel which contains the water to his right, and repeating the Bismillah, he should wash his hands thrice, then perform the act of abstersion, as has already been described, removing off his body whatever impurities it has. He should then perform the ablution of prayer in the manner already described, with the exception of washing the feet, which he should for the time being defer, because to wash out the feet and then step on the earth which is not clean would be a waste of water. He should then pour water over his head, thrice over the right side and thrice over the left. He should then rub his body on either side, the front and the back. Let the water flow into the interstices of his beard, making it reach the base of the hair, whether thick or sparse. A woman, however, need not undo her braids unless she is certain that without undoing them the water will not penetrate into the interstices of her hair. The person should not forget about those parts of the body which are bent or concealed, but should guard against touching his penis. Should he touch his penis, he should perform the act of ablution all over again. If, however, he has already performed his ablution before the major ablution, he need not go through it again. These then are the rules of ablution and ghusl, wudu and ghusl. We have discussed those elements of them which are indispensable for the traveller on the path of the hereafter to know to do. If on special occasions and under unusual circumstances he may need other points beside these, he should refer himself concerning them to the books of jurisprudence. Of all we have discussed concerning the major ablution, two things are obligatory: good intention and the washing of the whole body. In the case of the ablution, 6 things are obligatory: good intention, washing the face, washing the arms up to the elbows, wiping the head, washing the feet including the heels, and finally the observation of the above mentioned order in the performance of the act of ablution. Washing the different members of the body in uninterrupted succession, i.e. to commence washing the second member before the first is dried, and the third before the second has, is not obligatory. The major ablution is obligatory after 4 things: after the emission of semen, after the 2 places of circumcision meet together, after menstruation, and after childbirth. Other than these, it is simply ordained by custom after the usage of the Prophet, such as the major ablution for the 2 feasts, Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha, and the major ablution of the Friday and the different feasts, and the major ablution of the Ihram, that of the standing on Arafah and Muzdalifah, and at entering Mecca. Also performed after the usage of the Prophet are the 3 major ablutions during the last 3 days of the pilgrimage: the major ablution of the farewell circumambulation according to some, the major ablution of the unbeliever when he embraces Islam and is under no obligation to perform it by reason of sexual intercourse and the discharge of semen, the insane when he regains his sanity, and the person who has washed a dead body. All these are desirable. The manner of purification with sand. If, after earnestly trying to find water, a person is unable to secure any, or is prevented by the presence of some beast or obstacle from reaching the water supply, whenever the water is needed for the quenching of his thirst and that of his companion, whenever it belongs to someone else who declines to sell any of it except for too high of a price, or when the person himself happens to be suffering from a wound or ailment, and consequently fears that the use of water may result in the infection of the member, or in his acute sickness, he should wait until the time for the fulfillment of the ordinance arrives, and then proceed to an elevated land, the soil of which is pure, fine, and soft, so it is easily blown into dust. Then with his fingers held closely together, he should pat his palms over the sand, and lifting them to his face, he should wipe over every part of it once. As he does that, he should purpose in his mind the making of prayer permissible. In wiping his face, he is not required to force the dust between the hair, or whether it be sparse or thick. He should, however, make an effort to wipe his whole face with the dust. This can be accomplished with a single stroke, since the width of the face does not exceed that of 2 palms. In deciding whether or not he has covered his whole face, his own opinion is sufficient. He then should remove his ring and pat his palms over the sand 2nd time, during which he should hold his fingers wide apart. Having done this, he should place the back of the fingers of his right hand over the front part of the fingers of his left hand, in such a way that the tips of the fingers of the one hand will not project beyond the edge of the forefinger on the other hand. His hand is in this position. He should run his left hand over the back of his right forearm up to the elbow, and then turn over his hand so that the hollow of his left palm rests over the inner side of his right forearm by the elbow, and then should run it down towards the wrist and finish by stroking the outer side of the right thumb with the inner of his left. He should then do the same thing for his left arm. After that, he should wipe his two palms against each other and pass the fingers of the one hand between those of the other. The purpose of this regulation is to cover up both arms completely up to the elbows through a single patting of the palms over the sand. If this proves impossible, the person can pat his palms over the sand one or more times. Having fulfilled this and performed the ordained prayer, he may proceed to perform supererogatory prayer if he wishes. If he wishes to combine the enactment of two rites, he should perform the act of purification with sand over again prior to the enactment of the second rite. Thus, every ordained rite should be preceded by a single act of tayammum. Be prolonged. Furthermore, he should not repeat the Quran in the bathhouse except in his mind, yet there is no harm in repeating aloud the formula, I seek refuge in God against Shaitan, the accursed. Again, the practice of going to the bathhouse between the hour of sunset and nightfall is undesirable, because at that time the demons roam the earth. The bather may have someone else to rub his back and massage his body for him, as it has been related that Yusuf ibn Asbat has, before he died, requested that a certain stranger be allowed to wash his corpse after his death, and said, The man has rubbed my back and massaged my body for me when I was once bathing. I wish therefore to reward him with something which will please him, and I am sure it will please him very much to wash my corpse. The permissibility of having another rub one back and massage his body is attested by what one of the companions related concerning the Apostle of God. So said the companion, in one of his travels the Apostle of God stopped at an inn. Stretching himself out with his belly to the earth, a negro slave began to massage his back for him. Therefore I said, What is going on, O Apostle of God? To which he replied, The she-camel threw me off its back. Finally, when the individual is through with his bathing, he should thank God upon this blessing. For it has been said that hot water in winter time is a much sought luxury. Concerning baths and bathing, Ibn Umar said, Baths are an innovated luxury. This describes baths in their relation to the law, but from the viewpoint of medicine, they have been described as a protection against leprosy, especially after the use of a depilatory. It has also been said that depilating the pubes once a month cools the body, purifies the complexion, and increases virility. Again, it has been said, to urinate while standing in the bath in wintertime is better for the man than a dose of medicine. And again, to sleep after the bath in the summertime is as good as any dose of medicine. Washing the feet with cold water after the bath is protection against gout. Furthermore, the pouring of cold water over the head, as well as drinking it after the bath, is undesirable. These rules govern the conduct of men in the bathhouses. As to women, the Apostle said, It is not lawful for a man to take his wife into a bathhouse when others are bathing therein. According to a tradition, vouched for by more than 2 companions, it is unlawful for the man to enter a bathhouse without a veil, and it is unlawful for the woman to enter therein except after childbirth or when sick. Aisha herself entered the bathhouse when she was sick. Thus, whenever the woman has to go to the bathhouse, let her do so veiled. It is undesirable for the man to give her the fee, lest it be a help for her to do that which is undesirable. The second kind is bodily growths and falls into 8 groups. The first is the hair of the head, in the shaving of which there is no harm to him who desires to be clean. On the other hand, there is no harm in leaving it grown, provided it is regularly anointed and combed, and provided it is not left to grow in tufts, as the smart set are wont to do, or in long locks like the manner of the descendants of the noble blood, to whom the practice has become a distinctive sign. Unless the person be a descendant of noble blood, his wearing of long locks would be false and fake. The second is the hair of the moustache. According the Apostle said, Cut your moustaches off. According to another version, shear your moustaches. And according to another, trim your moustaches and spare your beard. In other words, let your moustaches extend around the upper lip, but not hang over it, i.e. let them encircle it. Of the same root is the phrase circling around in the verse, and thou shalt see the angels circling around about the throne. In still another version, the word used is pluck, which indicates cutting extremely short, while trim indicates a lesser extent. Said God, should he ask them of you and press you, you would show yourselves niggardly. In other words, should he urge you. Shaving the moustache, however, was never mentioned in the tradition, while trimming so closely as to resemble shaving has been related about the companions. Thus one of the followers, on seeing a person who had trimmed his moustache very closely, said, "You remind me of the companions of the Apostle of God." Al-Mughira ibn Shu'bah once said, "One day the Apostle of God saw me with a long moustache. Thereupon he said, 'Come hither and have your moustache cut off along a toothpick.' There is, however, no harm in leaving its extremities to hang down. Omar and others besides him did that, because the ends of the moustache do not cover the mouth and no food sticks to them while eating. The words of the apostles, 'spare the beards,' meant let them grow. According to one tradition, the apostle said, 'The Jews spare their moustache and trim their beards, but you do the opposite.' Some learned men disapproved of shaving and regarded as innovation. The third is the hair growth on the armpit, the plucking of which is desirable at least once every 40 days. Such an operation is quite easy and simple, as the person has been accustomed to it right from the beginning. But the person who has been accustomed to remove it by shaving may continue to do so, especially since plucking is tormenting and painful, while the sole purpose of its removal is cleanliness and the prevention of dirt from collecting in the interstices of the hair. This purpose is equally attained through shaving. The fourth is the hair on the pubes, the removal of which is desirable either by shaving or the use of a depilatory. Its removal should not be delayed for any longer than 40 days. Fifth are the nails, the manicuring of which is desirable, especially because of their horrible appearance and because of the dirt which collects underneath them when they are long. The Apostle of God said, "O Abu Hurairah, manicure your nails, for shaitan sits on them when they are long." The presence of a little dirt underneath the nails will not affect the validity of ablution, because little dirt will not prevent the water from penetrating underneath the nails. Furthermore, because of necessity, both by the Bedouins and the city people are usually lenient in this matter, particularly in connection with the toenails, the knuckles, and the back of the feet and the hands. And the Apostle of God was wont to command his followers to manicure their nails and take them to task for the dirt underneath their nails, but he did not command them to repeat their prayer. If he had done so, his commandment would have had the added benefit of admonishment against and warning against uncleanliness. Concerning the manner of manicuring the nails, I have not seen any genuine tradition, but I have heard that the Apostle of God, when manicuring his nails, began with the index finger of the right hand and finished with the thumb. Starting with the index finger of the right hand, he worked to the little finger of the same hand. Moving then to the left hand, he worked from the little finger to the left to the thumb. Last of all, he manicured the thumb of the right hand. Pondering over this, one of its aspects which seems to prove its veracity occurred to me. Now, such things do not become apparent except through the light of prophecy, but learned men of insight aim at deducing through reasoning the significance of these things when reported to them. What occurred to me, although Allah knows best, is that manicuring the nails of the fingers and toes is to begin with necessary. But whereas a hand is superior to the foot, a person should begin with the fingers. Of the two hands, the right is superior and consequently should come first. Of the 5 fingers of the right hand, the index finger, which points out at people when one is repeating the 2 words of Shahada, is superior. Therefore, it should mark the beginning. Since the order favoured by the law in matters of ablution and the like is to begin with the right and proceed in the same direction, The finger to the right of the index should come next. If the hand is placed with its back to the ground, then the thumb would be the finger to the right of the index. If it is placed with its palm to the ground, then the middle finger would be to the right of the index. But if you let the hand dangle naturally, its palm would be inclined towards the ground, because the right hand swings from the right to the left, and as the swinging motion is completed, the back of the hand goes up. Hence the natural position is the more preferable. Furthermore, if one palm is placed against the other, the fingers form, as it were, a circle, and consequently the person should commence with the index finger of the right hand, and from there work to the right until he returns to the same index finger. This will result in working from the index finger of the right to the little finger of the same hand, then from the little finger of the left hand to the thumb of the same hand. There remains the thumb of the right hand, with which the operation should be concluded. As to the toes, since no tradition governing the procedure of manicuring them has come down to us, I hold it to be better to begin with little toe of the right foot and working to the right end with the little toe of the left foot, which is exactly like the procedure followed in cleaning the toes. For the considerations which we have mentioned in connection with the hands do not hold here, since there is no forefinger. That points out at people when one repeats the two words of the Shahada in the foot. In fact, all the toes are in the same category and form a single line close to the ground. Therefore, one begins with the right. Nevertheless, any such assumption of their forming, as it were, a circle, when the sole of one foot is placed against that of the other, unlike the same thing in the case of the fingers, is unnatural. These minute details of the procedure become instantly apparent through the light of prophecy, but in our case they are extremely difficult. If we were asked concerning the order of procedure which would be followed in manicuring the nails, we might be able to give a satisfactory reply, but if we cite the practice of the Prophet of God and the procedure which he followed therein, we might be able to thereby ascertain its rule. His reminder to us through his practice of the significance of his procedure therein calls for the deduction of that significance. No one should think that the actions of the Prophet and all their details have not been governed by a definite standard and a fixed rule and order. In fact, all the voluntary actions which we have already mentioned, man follows one of two or more procedures, the selection of which is motivated not by sheer argument, but by a definite reason which demands that procedure be followed and preferred. For the haphazard way of doing things just as they come is characteristic of animals, while governing actions and movements by the standard of their relative significance is peculiar of the saints of God. The more regulated and governed are the actions and movements of man, and the less they are haphazard and neglected, and the farther removed they are from caprice, the nearest would his rank be to that of the prophets and saints, and the closer would his position be to God. This is because he who is close to the Prophet is close to God. Furthermore, he who is close to God in the nature of the case, one of his favourites, and he who stands close to the favourite is in turn a favourite. We therefore seek refuge in God against having the direction of our actions and movements in the hands of Shaitan, ruled and governed by him through our passions and whims. The manner in which the Apostle applied kohl to his eyes has been accepted as the norm and standard for such procedures. He would apply it thrice to the right and twice to the left eye, beginning with the right for its superiority. The disparity between the number of applications to each eye is for the sake of having the sum total odd in number, because odd numbers are superior to even numbers. God himself is unique and prefers odd numbers. Consequently, the actions of man should always correspond to one of the attributes of God. For this reason, the use of an odd number of stones in abstersion has been viewed with favour. The number of the applications of kohl to the eyes has not been limited to 3, although there is an odd number, because the share of the left eye would then be 1 application only, which thing is insufficient and will not ordinarily extend over all the roofs of the eyelashes. The right eye has been assigned 3 applications because preference is necessary to produce an even number, and since the right eye is superior, it enjoys that preference. If you should say, why was the left eye limited to 2 applications? My answer would be that the limitation was dictated by necessity, since if each eye were given an odd number of applications, the sum total of applications would be even, because the sum of 2 odd numbers is an even number. But the preference if for an odd number in the total applications of both eyes rather than of each eye. There is, however, another possibility in the applications of kohl, namely to follow the practice in ablution and apply the kohl thrice to each eye. This procedure is the more preferable. If I were to investigate all the details which the Prophet observed in his actions and movements, it would take me a long time to exhaust the subject. Therefore, base your future in your past experience, and know that no learned man will ever become the heir of the Prophet unless he equates himself with all the statutes of law, so that nothing will separate them from each other except one rank, that of prophecy, which is the distinguishing degree between the inheritor and the inherited. For the inherited is he who has earned and collected the money, while the inheritor is he who has neither earned or collected it, but received it by transmission. These and other significations, despite their relative easiness when compared with the profound mysteries and secrets, are not independently comprehended by except the prophets, and are not elicited through transmission, after their importance has been pointed out by the prophets, except by their heirs, the learned men. The 6th and 7th are the navel cord and the foreskin respectively. The navel cord is cut off at the time of birth, while purification through circumcision is performed by the Jews on the 7th day after birth. Consequently, contradicting them by delaying the operation until the child cuts his front teeth is more desirable and less dangerous. The Apostle said, circumcision is a law unto man and a meritorious deed on the part of women. Nevertheless, excess should be avoided in female circumcision. The Apostle once said to Atiya, who used to practice the circumcision of women, O Atiya, be moderate when you perform the operation of circumcision of women, and cut off only a small portion of the prepuce of the clitoris, for that is better fitted to preserve femininity and more welcome to masculinity. In other words, it does not impair the woman's passion nor rob the man of his pleasure at the time of intercourse. Behold then the refined diction and euphemism of the Prophet's speech, and how light of prophecy has shone from the affairs of the hereafter, which are the noblest concerns of prophecy, and illuminated the affairs of this world, so that matters of great importance, the ignorance of which may result in grave consequences, have been revealed to the Apostle, despite the fact that he was unlettered. Praise therefore be to God, who has sent his Prophet to be a mercy unto men, and through him make available for them the blessings of this world and of the world to come. The 8th is the long beard, the discussion of which we deferred in order to append to it certain rules which govern it, and several innovations practiced in connection with it, since this is the most suitable place for the treatment. People have differed as to the length of the beard. Some held the view that there is no harm in the person taking his beard with his hand and cutting off what projects below his grip. This was done by Ibn Umar and several of the followers at-Tabi'un, and met the approval of Ash-Shu'bi and Ibn Sirin, but was frowned at by Al-Hasan al-Basri and Qatada, who said that letting it alone is better practice, which conforms to the words of the Prophet, spare your beards. The right practice is not difficult to determine, provided it does not lead to trimming the beard and rounding off the sides, for its excessive length renders the appearance unseemly, and releases the tongues of backbiters with ridicule. Consequently, it is better to avoid such practice. Al-Nakhai said, I wonder why a sane man whose beard is long does not trim it, thereby avoiding its being too long and its being too short, for moderation is desirable and good in everything. For this reason it has been said, the bigger the beard, the smaller the mind. There are in connection with the beard 10 disapproved practices. One of these, some are more reprehensible than others. These are dyeing the beard black, bleaching it with sulphur, plucking the grey hairs in it, elaborately trimming it, augmenting its size, neglecting it, dishevelled and untidy for the sake of affecting asceticism, boasting of its black colour as indicative of youth and of its grey colour as a sign of venerable age, and dyeing it red or yellow, thereby emulating the righteous but lacking their good intention. The first disapproved practice is in connection with the beard and dyeing it black. The practice is forbidden, as the Prophet said, "The best of your youth are those who emulate the old among you, and the worst of your old are those who emulate the youthful among you." Emulating the old refers to the emulation of their poise and dignity, but not their grey hair. Not only was the dyeing of the hair black forbidden, but it was also described as a sign of the people of hell, and according to another version, it was identified as a sign of the unbelievers. A certain man who was living at the time of Umar and was wont to dye his beard black got married. Soon afterwards the dye faded and his grey hair was no longer concealed. Thereupon the relatives of his wife brought him before the caliph, who annulled his marriage and had him flogged, and said to him, "You deceived them by concealing your grey hair." It is said that the first to dye his beard black was Pharaoh, may the curse of God be upon him. It is also related, on the authority of Ibn Abbas, that the Prophet said, "At the end of time there will be men who will dye their beards black, like the crop of the pigeon. The same will not enjoy the fragrance of paradise." The second practice is dyeing the beard yellow or red. The practice is permissible in order to conceal the age of warriors from the unbelievers at the times of raids and jihad. If it is not for this purpose, but rather for the sake of emulating men of religion, then it is blameworthy. The Apostle of God said, "Yellow is the colour with which the Muslims dye their beards, and red is that which the believers dye their beards." Henna was used for the red dye, while saffron and filari for the yellow. Some of the learned men dyed their beards black before setting out on raids. There is no harm in this practice, provided the intention is genuine and not shadowed by passion or lust. The third practice is bleaching the beard with sulphur, to giving the appearance of an advanced age for the purpose of gaining deference and veneration, having their testimony accepted at court, and the narration of traditions on the authority of the masters accredited. They do it out of their desire to lord it over youth, and in order to appear very learned, thinking that age would make them superior. But how far from the truth this is, for age does not increase the ignorance except with ignorance. Knowledge is the fruit of reason, which is a native talent removed from the influence of age and not affected by grey hair. But he who is born foolish increases in folly with the years. Furthermore, the masters were wont to give precedence to the learned youth. Thus Umar used to give Ibn Abbas, despite his youth, precedence over leading the companions, and used to seek his counsel rather than theirs. Ibn Abbas had said himself, "God giveth not his servants knowledge except in their youth, and in youth lieth all that is good." In support of his assertion, he cited the words of God when he said, "They said, we heard a youth make mention of them. They call him Abraham." He also cited the words of God, "They were youths who had believed in their Lord, and in guidance had we increased them, and also we bestowed on him wisdom while yet a child." Anas was wont to say, "The Apostle of God died having in his head and beard no more than 20 grey hairs." On being told, "But Abu Hamza, the Apostle was well advanced in age when he died," Anas replied, "Yes, but God did not disgrace him with grey hair." "Is it a disgrace to have grey hair?" they asked. Anas replied, "Do you not all dislike grey hair?" It is also said that Ihya bin Akhtam was appointed judge when he was 21 years old. While sitting in his court one day, a certain man, wishing to deride him for his young years, asked him, "Of what age is the judge? May God establish him." Ibn Akhtam retorted, "Of the same age as Attab ibn Aidi, when the Apostle of God entrusted him with the governorship of Mecca and his judgeship." And with this retort he silenced him. It was also reported on the authority of Malik that he was said, I read in one of the books the following statement, let not a man's beard deceive you, for the bull has one also. Abu Amr ibn al-A'la said, whenever you see that a man is tall in stature, but his head is small and beard long and wide, be sure that he is a fool, although he may be Umayyah ibn Abd al-Shams. Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani said, I have seen old men of 80 years follow a youth in order to learn from him. Ali ibn al-Husayn said, he who has preceded you in knowledge is your Imam in this respect, though he may be younger than you in years. Abu Amr ibn al-Ala was once asked, Is it becoming to the old man to learn from youth? He answered saying, ignorance abases man and knowledge ennobles him. Yahya ibn Mu'in said, on seeing Ahmad ibn Hanbal walking behind a mule ridden by a Shafi, told him, O Abu Abdullah, I see that you have discontinued the company of Sufyan despite his advanced age for the company of this youth in order to learn from him. Ahmad replied, if you only knew what is good, you would have walked behind his mule from the other side. If, because of his death, I should miss receiving the knowledge of Sufyan from him personally, I could get it at any time through other transmitters. But if I should miss the company of this youth, I would never receive any of his learning either directly from him or indirectly through transmitters. The fourth practice is plucking the grey hairs of the beard because of one's loathing for grey hair. The Apostle of God has definitely forbade the plucking of grey hair and said that it was the light of the believer. It is of the same nature as dyeing the hair black, and the reasons of its being disapproved have already been mentioned. Grey hair is the light of God, and he who dislikes it dislikes the light. The fifth practice is plucking the beard in whole or in part for fun or play. This is disapproved. It renders the appearance unseemly. Similarly, plucking the hair off either side of his lower lips is an innovation. A certain man who was wont to pluck the hair off the side of the lower lip took the witness stand before Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, but the Caliph rejected his testimony. Likewise, Umar ibn Khattab and Ibn Abi Layla, the judge of Al-Madinah, refused to accept the testimony of any person's practice it was to pluck his beard. Plucking the beard during its early growth in order to appear beardless is among the major evils, for the beard is the ornament of man. Furthermore, there are among the angels of God some who swear saying, by him who hath adorned mankind with beards. It is one of the signs of perfect creation, and distinguishes men from women. According to some singular interpretation, it is the beard which is meant by the words of God when he said, he added to his creatures what he will. The followers of Al-Anhaf ibn Qais remonstrated, saying, we wish we could purchase for Al-Anhaf a beard, though it may cost us 20,000. Shurayh al-Qadi said, I wish I had a beard, though it were for 10,000. For how could the beard be disliked when it gives man honour, identifies him in the sight of others with learning, induces them to look up to him with respect, gives him the exalted seat in the assemblies of the learned, focuses the eyes of all on him, entitles him to precedence over his associates, and shields him from dishonour, since he who curses is restrained from it if the man has a beard. It is said that all the inhabitants of paradise are beardless except Aaron, the brother of Moses, who has a beard which reaches down to his navel. It has been given to him as a special favour and distinction. The sixth practice is trimming the beard in successive contours for the sake of attracting women. Said Ka'ab, there will be at the end of time men who will trim their beards in the shape of the dovetail, and will have the toes of their shoes upturned like the scythe. Such people will have no manners. The seventh practice is augmenting the size of the beard by allowing the hair which covers the temples, which belong to the head, to grow and join that of said whiskers, thereby going beyond the limits of the ordinary beard and reaching halfway down the cheeks. This is contrary to the habit of becoming righteous. The eighth practice is combing the beard for the sake of attracting the attention of men. Bishr said concerning beards, there are two sins in connection with beards: combing them for the sake of attracting attention of men, and neglecting them dishevelled to appear before men ascetic. The 9th and 10th practices are respectively to admire the beard's blackness and its greyness. Such self-admiration is blameworthy with regard to all the members of the body, as well as traits and actions, as will be later discussed. This is what we have intended to discuss of the various kinds of adornment and cleanliness. 3 traditions dealing with the rules which govern the body have given us 12 items, of which 5 pertain to the head, namely parting the hair, rinsing the mouth, inhaling and exhaling water for cleaning the nose, trimming the moustache, and using the toothpick. 3 pertain to the hands, namely manicuring the nails, washing the knuckles, and cleaning the fingertips. And 4 pertain to the body, namely plucking the hair off the armpits, shaving the pubes, circumcision, and abstersion with water, all of which have been mentioned in tradition. Now, whereas the purpose of this book is to discuss outward and physical cleanliness rather than inward, we shall confine ourselves to the former. Let it, however, be known that the inward filth and dirt from which it is necessary to clean oneself are innumerable, and we shall take them up in detail in the quarter on the destructive markers of life, and shall also discuss the manner of their removal and the method of purifying the heart therefrom. Here ends the book on the mysteries of purity, to be followed by that on the mysteries of prayer.